Good afternoon, everybody. Ori Spado here, the accidental gangster with stories with Ori, being filmed at Studio Place in Brentwood, California. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. And as you know, folks, I said that I'm going to be giving you insight into the movie industry of things that you don't know, you don't understand, and I hope to be able to educate you. And the beginning today, I have a very dear friend of mine, Sean Robbins, producer of Mortal Kombat and a whole slew of other movies. Now, through the past year that I think I've known you, Sean, I have built a deep respect for you. And it's not because of your movie.
It's because I'm so handsome?
Huh?
It's because I'm so handsome, I know.
No, it's because you are a wonderful father. He has the most beautiful, young, 8-year-old girl who's going to become a professional golfer, and you're going to be hearing a lot about this little lady. But, you know, it's welcome every day I go on Instagram and I see this little girl, and I want to commend you for that.
Well, I appreciate that. She's
Sean,
the best thing in my life.
Thank you. Sean, you got an interesting career, how you got into the movie industry. But, you know, you were in the Peace Corps, correct?
I did something called Partnership for Service Learning that the Peace Corps at the time ran. So I spent a year in Kingston, Jamaica, back when it was the most dangerous city in our hemisphere. So I lived and worked in Kingston, both for the Jamaican Human Rights Council and in prison 2 days a week.
Man. Now you are, how did you get in the movie industry and why?
Growing up in Ohio and then I went to Northwestern, it was always cold and gray and snowy or too hot and miserable. But I was always a storyteller and I always liked telling stories. And when I went to Jamaica, I was introduced to something that I didn't know existed year round. And it was this thing called the sun. And so I said, fuck, I'm not moving to New York. I'm going to move to LA. And so that was really, sunshine was really the difference between me maybe going into theater or publishing. And the day after I got back from that program, I cut my dreads off and moved to Los Angeles.
Really?
Yeah.
Boy, it sounds like my life story. Holy shit. I was born in upstate New York. I had the same thing. The sun never shined.
Did you have dreadlocks?
Huh?
Did you have dreadlocks?
No, I never had dreadlocks.
Maybe one difference.
Never went that way, my friend. You know, I got a lot of questions, but people like yourself, or as a movie producer, people don't understand the word green light, which is the most probably important word as a producer that you could hear.
It's the only way I
Green
get paid.
light. And people don't understand how many films do you actually work on, TV and movies at the same time?
So I have a slate of, let's say, probably 50 or 60 film and TV projects. To understand that, when you're building a slate, it's a pyramid. And the bottom of the pyramid is all of your projects. And what you're basically trying to do is have one or two of them reach the top every single year. And so, what inevitably happens is you'll have a project start, you'll have a script, it'll be great. You'll put a director on it. It'll start moving up the chain. The director will fall out. The studio will have a transition. All of a sudden your project isn't a priority. It goes back to the bottom. Another project will ascend. That project will have its own tumultuous, sort of history. And sooner or later, if you're hopefully, both lucky and you have some acumen in what you do, your project will reach the top and you'll get it made. And then if you're really lucky and good at your job, it might even be good.
Beautiful. And that green light is the most magic number that you hear. That's when you go into production.
Yes. So what's interesting about the green light process is, it used to essentially be a one-person show. There was a person at a studio who had that power. It's now not even just bifurcated. It's become an entire process, an entire system. So there's many layers to it. There's home video, there's foreign, there's a lot of people that you have to please in order for your movie or TV show, but in this case, let's talk movies, to get the green light. Now, and the truth of the green light is, even once you have it, and I've said this to my mother many times, your project or your movie isn't truly greenlit until you've made a week of production. Because there unfortunately have been movies that go through that first week and then the plug's pulled. So,
yeah, I've seen that happen. Why is that? Why is production? I mean, I seen a movie one time. The money was put up, and De Niro and Wahlberg were on the set actually doing dialogue. When the money fell out, the cameraman and the grip started tearing everything down.
Listen, I've been lucky. I shouldn't say lucky, but I've been fortunate enough that it's never happened on any of my movies. And there are myriad reasons why things like that can happen. It can be that your financing isn't actually secure. It can be that, sometimes the studios and what they're seeing isn't what they wanted. It can be, generally speaking, if your project's going to fall apart, you probably as a producer didn't do your job up front, really is the answer. When I develop a movie and when I'm on set, I like to think that 95% of my job has already been done. So when I'm on set, I use that time because I'm away from my daughter. I use that time to, one, make sure everything on the movie's happening the way I want it to, the way the financiers or the studio wants it to, make sure my actors are happy, make sure my director is supported. But I'm also thinking about the other 50 projects on my slate and what I can be doing to help them. And it's also the time when, since I'm away from generally LA or away from my friends, away from my family, it's a good time also to take some time for yourself, whatever that may be. Right. So a lot of people come back from set 20 pounds heavier. I generally come back 10 pounds lighter.
Well, you are you walk every day. You're hiking every day.
I do hike every day.
A mountain guy.
Well, yeah, a little bit. One of the and I don't want to say benefits of COVID, considering everything that happened during it. But one of the things was I was always a hiker, and during COVID there came a place where, for a lot of reasons, I was unhappy, and probably for the first time in my life, actually sad and lonely, and I started hiking again. And I started inviting people because I realized, people would actually get outside. They weren't afraid. And either the genius or the madness was I put that first picture of myself and someone else hiking, and I didn't put the second picture up. And the second person said, well, I don't understand, why is he up and I'm not? And I put the second picture up, and then the third person was upset that they weren't up. And so, my Instagram now is essentially an homage to my daughter and my daily hikes. So nothing terribly interesting.
It's a pleasure watching your daughter every day.
Well, thank you.
I mean, she is a little lady, and she could hit that ball better than any guy I know.
Well, the irony is I don't play golf. So, when I walk the course with her every time she plays, I'm literally the caddy.
How did she get started in that?
So I would have to actually go back to my father. My father, growing up in Ohio, was a baseball player, a basketball player, and a golfer. And he played baseball at Ohio State, was, I think, drafted by the Yankees back when there were, 50 or 60 or 100 rounds, never played. His rival in high school played the same three sports, baseball, basketball, and golf. And his rival in high school was Jack Nicklaus, the world's greatest golfer ever.
Really?
Yeah. And so my father, he actually passed away on a golf course in New Zealand. I mean, his true passion was golfing. Because of that, my brother was a great golfer. He was, a scratch golfer. My mom was second at the club this year, I think. I stupidly at 12 or 13 thought there were more important things in life, women and alcohol, and at the time weed and whatever else there was. So I gave up golfing. When COVID broke, my daughter and I, Isabella, went back to Florida to see my mom. My mom took her on the course. And Isabella was watching and said, it looks like fun. And so there's a pro there that my mom had come get a little club. And I have video of the first time my daughter hit the ball. And that was, I think she was 6. And she's been taking lessons now. And, her dream is to get a Stanford golf scholarship and be the world's greatest female golfer. And if you know my daughter, I wouldn't discount it happening. So
I would not discount it at all with that little girl. She will be there someday. I hope I'm still here to be able to see that.
Well, she's about to turn 9, so only have a few more years.
9 years old, so good. In Hollywood, they say nothing happens without the written word. Now, you as a producer, you must have to read many scripts, books, and different things. How do you select a film or a TV show that you're going to work on, that you want? What inspires you?
So
you want to do that particular project?
So it's actually the process I use is a little different. So I started as a writer. My background is novel and short story writing, and then theater and film writing. And in Hollywood, I actually started writing initially, and realized if I continued solely as a writer, I'd probably be dead as an alcoholic or a drug addict. And realized just the way I am, I need a lot of things happening at once. And so, I have 50 or 60 film and TV projects. I do some restaurant stuff. I'm soon to be published children's book author. I'm writing a book about the 10 times I could have died. I hike every day. I'm half the week a single father. So what I like to do, as opposed to finding scripts that are already of sort of whole cloth, is I generally build things the way our project came together. It came to me as a script. That generally isn't what I do. generally I come up with ideas for movies, or I find true stories, or I find inspiration somewhere. I find writers to build them with me. And so, a lot of the process and a lot of what I love is that creative give and take, the back and forth, finding the connective tissue and sinew in a project and how you can take these ideas, make them great. And that process, is, I think, some of the most fun you can have. And then it's building that. It's finding the right director. It's finding the right actor or actress. It's putting those pieces together. And again, if you're lucky and you hear the magical words green light, you spend, a few months generally away from home. And sometimes it ends up being an amazing project. And sometimes you pretend you had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, Sean and I, Sean happens to be a producer on, if my film ever gets made, The Accidental Gangster. And the script is being written by George Gallo. Now, George promised me a masterpiece. And he's got a little over 40 pages written. And he told me this week he's back in.
Well, that's good to know, because I didn't know that. I love hearing that.
So, no, I'm telling you that, and I'm telling you here in public. And he said he's getting his mind back into it. And hopefully, within the next month or so, he has a finished script.
So in thinking about how movies get made, you always start with what are the auspices, right? Which is why I've done a lot of true stories. I worked on Tag, which got made. I worked on All My Life that got made. When this project was initially brought to me, the fact that it's true is the first thing that spoke to me. The fact that you actually lived this life, that these experiences happened to you, because, what Hollywood has become, it's become essentially IP generated. It's what is the intellectual property. And that's why Barbie made $1.5 billion, right? That's why Oppenheimer, a true story, has made a ton of money. And so it's always, to be honest, it's always easier to work on things that aren't true, because I'm beholden to your truth. And obviously we don't want to do anything that besmirches you or who you were or who you are. But it's also, it allows people to realize, like, this actually happened. So if I pitched a movie like Tag to you, I said, oh, it's a group of guys who go around and play tag. You go, fuck you. That's the dumbest idea ever. Like, that doesn't even sound real. And actually, I had a writer tell me in a roundtable, like, this idea is stupid. I go, it actually happened. And so that's why it was so appealing to me, your story, because it was real. Then you get someone like George Gallo, who's just an amazing writer, an amazing storyteller, who's going to bring life to it, both as a writer and a director. And it becomes something where you go, what, this actually has a shot of getting made. And so, when you look at your own slate the way I do, there are projects that are really just pecuniary, in nature. You go, okay, well, you know what? It's kind of a programmer. It can make some money. And there's some projects you go, well, I don't really like it, but my daughter might like it. And there's some projects you go, this is one of the ones that really actually speaks to me, and that's what one of something like your story is.
Thank you. It'd be rare, and I hope I'm alive when it does get made, because it's very rare that I see any gangster movies made of the gangster still being alive.
Well,
but you know what? I told Sammy Gravano, he and I had a talk one day, and we were talking about Sonny Franchese, who was a friend of mine for over 50 years, who just passed away at 103. And I told Sammy, I said, Sammy, I'm going to live to 105. I'm going to beat Sonny.
From your lips.
And then Sammy hesitated, and he said, Ori, I'm going to live to 106. I said, Sammy, why the fuck did you pick 106 after I picked 105? He said, so I can go to your funeral. So that's our deal. So hopefully I'm here till 105, and Sammy could attend my funeral.
You know what? I think I can get our movie made in the next 50 years. So I think you're going to be okay.
Think you get it done?
In the next 50, yeah.
Folks, people don't realize, what's the average film take?
So the fastest movie I ever worked on from initial idea to going into production was 1.5 years. And that's a unicorn. That never happens. The longest process I've ever had from initial idea to going into production was 15 years. And that movie ended up actually being, it's a great story. It ended up being my daughter's first movie ever in a movie theater. The premiere of that film, which took me 15 years to get made, we were living in New Orleans, my daughter and I at the time shooting, I was prepping another movie. And the movie's premiere was in New York. And so she had this halcyon experience of what movies are. We flew first class. I didn't tell her, of course, Paramount's paying. We stayed at the Mandarin Oriental in a suite. Of course, I didn't tell her Paramount's paying. We had room service. I had 24 tickets. So it was all my friends and their kids. She's in the limo. She's meeting all the stars. She's going to the after parties. And I remember watching her watch this movie. It was the first time she'd ever been in a movie theater with another audience. And she's watching the movie, and I'm literally just sitting there, and she doesn't laugh. She doesn't smile. She doesn't giggle. She doesn't move. She doesn't breathe. I think once or twice she might have taken a bite of popcorn. And the movie ends, and I'm like, oh my God, she hated it. Like, I made this movie, like in one of the few family films I've done, which I could actually show her when she's in. By the way, it was her 5th birthday present. I should mention that. And I'm like, my daughter hates this film. And I look at her, I go, Isabel, what did you think? She goes, Dad, it was amazing. Can we watch it again? And that right there was probably the singular best moment I've ever had as a film.
Really?
I mean, it validates everything. To do something that meets the approval of your daughter is the best. It really is. So.
Man, that's awesome. You are a lucky man, Mr. Robbins. I gotta say that.
I don't complain.
You know?
I don't complain. I'll tell you that. I mean, my daughter, and she knows this. I always tell her that we should be thankful for what we have, not covetous of what we don't. And so, I mean, making movies is not the worst way to make a living, and living in LA in the sunshine is not the worst way to live. And working with people like you, it all works.
I read something, and I'm not sure if I read it correctly, but you love food. And you have eaten at every award-winning Zagat restaurant. Is that correct?
So you're close. So I grew up in the food and beverage business. My father was an alcohol distributor. And so let's say 6 out of 7 days a week, we ate at the restaurants that we were selling, the wines or the beers or soft drinks that he sold. And so I always grew up with a love of food, and Sundays my mom would cook. And so when I moved to LA, the first job I actually had was working for Gallo in their fine wine division. And I drove a Chevy S10 pickup truck with a cap on the back. It had no air conditioning. I mean, I'm sweating sitting here with you right now because of the lights, and I traveled. I lived in Venice at the time. My accounts were Manhattan, Hermosa, Redondo, Torrance, and San Pedro. And I worked from about 4 a.m. till about 9 or 10 at night. I hardly slept. And I went on my first date in LA. And I remember I picked this restaurant, and it was this great thing. And at some point during the meal, I literally fell asleep at the table. That's how tired I was. And I remember waking up and looking at this beautiful woman who never wanted to see me again. And I had this moment where I go, I'm going to eat at every restaurant in the LA Zagat Guide. And I bought one, and I started this process where I would, sort of mark where I'd been and where I'd been. And it ended up being a 14-year, about 2,500 restaurant journey to do it. And so, I traveled from Long Beach to Pasadena and, in San Gabriel Valley, and ate everywhere that was in those guides. And every year, until about the 10th year, every year, let's say I'd been to 1,000 restaurants. When the new guide came out, I'd only been to 800 because places had closed. And so, and during that time, my father ended up getting throat cancer and was given a week to live, and luckily lived another almost 10 years. And so in some ways, it was paying homage to him. And the final restaurant I ate at was actually at Pink's. And ironically, I don't eat hot dogs. But I needed a place I knew wouldn't close, that I'd never have to eat at for the final restaurant. And so, I continue that to this day. I've owned some restaurants. I still eat out all the time. I'm lucky to have a daughter who will go out and eat with me, some crazy fun stuff. So yeah, I think maybe you just got a little insight into some of my OCD, because, when I take things on, generally I do them to the extreme. I hike every day, and I bought a kaleidoscope. Now I'm telling way too much, but I bought a kaleidoscope a few years ago. Now I have 50 of them because I thought the first one looked lonely. Yeah.
Kaleidoscope?
Yeah, kaleidoscopes.
Man. But you said Pink's was the last restaurant?
Pink's was, so to finish off the last.
Pink's is on Zagat?
Pink's is in, yeah, it's actually pronounced Zagat. But nobody calls it that. Zagat. That was the last name of the family. And I actually had them. It was all a charity event for the James Cancer Hospital in Columbus, where my father, had his surgery. It was in every single guide. And again, I had to pick a restaurant I knew wouldn't close and never have to go to. So I think I ate a turkey dog and maybe some French fries. But I believe it was the only time that they did waiter service at Pink's. They shut down the entire parking lot for me. We had tables, we had waiters. I think there were 100 some people there. It was a fun experience. That was long ago though. Now, I mean, that was prior to my daughter being born. But my fascination with food and travel hasn't stopped. My daughter is about to turn 9. I think she's been to 27 countries. And so
27 countries?
Yeah. I mean, between work and pleasure, we travel and eat a lot.
Sean, I want to ask you one last question over here. As somebody that's familiar with my story, working as a producer, and once George is finished with his script, then it's your magic that's going to make everything come to reality. As far as if it will be a studio film, a streamer, or whatever. Okay, but these ladies just ask me, and people ask me all the time, who do I want to play me? Now, one time I said, well, there's only one guy that could really play me, and that's Denzel Washington. And they
Obviously.
said, what? How could Denzel play you? I said, Denzel could because he's probably one of the best that could say a lot without ever opening his mouth. But now, if somebody, I can't determine, and we don't know what's going to happen, but who would you think of the actors out there today?
Who should play you?
Yeah.
See, well, this is a trick question because if you reverse engineer the way movies get made today, right? You start with who's actually going to get the movie made, whose value makes it worthwhile, right? And or who, and again, you broach the question: is it a studio movie or a streamer? And there are different rules when it comes to those things as to whose value matters, or who's going to actually drive ticket sales, or who's going to, make people want to, pony up the money for a new streaming service. And so, I think the answer to the question, if you're going to say someone like Denzel Washington, you go, well, could it really be Denzel Washington? I mean, you're an Italian American. Denzel obviously isn't, right? Then I say, who really should play you is Julia Roberts, because she's a fantastic actor, right? And she can do anything. I mean, the actual answer to my question would be this: the way in which films are really built. The answer to the question isn't apparently obvious until we read the script,
Right.
until we see what George has done with your magical story, and until we really get a sense of what are the words coming out of your mouth. What are the situations that you're in, right? Because there's your life that you've lived, and then there's the stories you tell. And some of those stories may be 100% true, and some of them may be 75% true or 100% true in your memory, right? I've got stories where I go, did it really happen that way? I don't remember, but it sounds good. And until we see what that shape is, right? And until we realize, hold on a second, it may be Denzel Washington. It may be someone completely different. It may be a person we haven't thought of yet. It may be Glenn Powell. Right? It may be a million different actors could be it. But until we know what the shape of the movie looks like, and of course we have a writer-director, and until we talk to him, it's an impossible question. Very rarely have I been on a project where I go, I'm going to develop this for this actor, and it ends up being that person. Generally what happens is you develop it with an eye toward a certain type of actor, and either you get someone like that, or you go the complete opposite. You realize, you know what? I thought I wanted a comedian. I actually want someone who's a great, I shouldn't say comedians aren't great actors. You want someone who's known as more of a actor's actor, who then you show can be funny. In your case, you need someone who can be a raconteur. You need someone who can tell great stories. You need someone who can be, a bit Machiavellian. You need someone who can be a bit conniving. You need someone who can, at the end of the day, also though, have a great heart, right? And wants to do the right things. Or listen, all these movies, there's always got to be lessons learned. And so, I care less right now about who plays your story than we make a movie that at the end of the day we're all proud of.
That's right. Well, Sean, I want to thank you very much for coming here today. Is there anything you'd like to tell the audience before you leave?
Is there anything I'd like to tell the audience? The only thing I would like to say is, since we brought her up, I want to say, because my daughter's birthday is coming up in 2 weeks, so I want to tell my daughter Isabella happy 9th birthday. Because by the time this comes out, maybe it'll be a nice little birthday present for her. So
Well, I want to say happy birthday to Isabel, and I'm looking forward to, we're going to have lunch or dinner with that young girl pretty soon.
sounds awesome, my
Sean,
friend.
thank you very
It's a
much.
pleasure. You got it, my friend. Thank you.